using things like heavily psychoactive drugs like Tren, which like you can see what happens in like, rodents when they expose themselves to these compounds. What do you think about, there's a lot of teenagers getting into anabolics at a younger age now based on, influence of social media. They want to look like their, idol who's in their late 20s and has developed their physique over a span of multiple years of androgen, abuse or whatever. Some of these individuals are not just using like testosterone, which at least, it's bioidentical. You would sort of know what to predict from what happens to test exposure. Not that I would condone it, but using things like heavily psychoactive drugs like Tren, which like you can see what happens in like, rodents when they expose themselves to these compounds, and you can sort of extrapolate for humans. But do you think, like from a neuroplasticity aspect, do you think there is risk of permanent psychological changes from exposure to these compounds, even though they're like neuroplasticity is like peaked sort of thing, or they're more able to? Okay. Yeah,
I do. And I want to say again, I do. And I'm not just saying that wearing my hat as a university professor. I'm saying that because I just think if you think about what is the probability that they're going to have a career that is enhanced by this, what is the probability that, if anything, it's probably going to interfere with their ability to succeed in any other kind of job or endeavor? Relationship to self, also an important relationship. I mean, it's absolute, to me, it's absolutely dreadful. And I think it's a terrible idea. What is important to address, however, is the why question. Why do they feel compelled to do this? Is it simply availability? Is it that the ideal that they're trying to achieve, saran wrapped skin and, 3% body fat? Is it that they think that's being presented to them as the healthy ideal? Those questions are also really important. So to be really clear, I think it's terrible. I personally don't think anyone should, unless there's a real clinical need, I don't think anyone should touch hormone therapies for sake of performance enhancement until they've well past, childhood and puberty and into adulthood. And even then, I'm not so sure it's a great idea. I did one episode, I'll do another one, but on testosterone and estrogen optimization for my podcast. And I learned that there are male individuals in their 70s and 80s who maintain pretty respectable testosterone levels. These are people who are physically active, take really good care of themselves. Yes, there's a genetic component, but they do the work. And so when I hear that teenagers and even people in their 20s are getting into these, especially the more dangerous varieties of these testosterone augmentation, I really worry. It's not me being hyper reactive. I really genuinely worry, and I just say no. Like, it's just like and I know a lot of people will like roll their eyes and say, oh, you don't know what I'm dealing with. And that's true too. I also don't know what they're dealing with. I don't have any concept of what it's like to be them. And that I admit that as well.
Yeah. It's crazy how like the ideal male physique, or like it's so paradoxical that the fitness industry is like the least healthy industry because it's plagued by the most like hormone abuse of all. And frankly, a lot of like bad diet habits that, reinforce like eating disorders and stuff, like in the fitness industry,
Well, and where this really went off the rails was a few years ago when it wasn't. So, the fitness industry has always had these individuals. Like if you look at the old muscle and fitness magazines that the Weeders put out there, I mean, all those physiques were unrealistic, clearly drug assisted, 98% of them. And we could do natty or nots on all the rest. But that's, so the point is that the fitness industry has always been driving that a little bit, but the movie industry is what really exacerbated this increase, because what you saw were movie actors and action heroes who took on, sort of action figure type physiques. And that these are individuals that are considered the what we call them celebrities for a reason, because they're celebrated, right? Yeah. And so it's actually the fault of the entertainment industry to present that imagery, because you and I both know that with very rare exceptions, when we see somebody who's getting really, really lean and big for a role, of course they're assisted. And I know firsthand that peptide use is rampant in Hollywood right now. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's the men and women. And so that's actually the biggest concern for me. The fitness industry has always been one that was a little bit niche. But now it's the movie industry has really shifted this. And you're seeing this with plastic surgery, mostly in females, lip augmentation in young people. I mean, this is terrible. This is really terrible. And so I think the movie industry needs to check itself on this one.
I think a lot of the even the physiques now that the youth are seeing that are inspiring them to use anabolics at too young of an age, the original people those young people are aspiring to look like are individuals who originally were inspired themselves by the Arnolds, by the, those individuals who otherwise basically built their entire livelihood and like fame off of the back of like anabolic steroid use, frankly. Like, would Arnold be who he was if he didn't use gear? Like, probably not.
No. I saw him the other day. He looks great. He's training hard and looks healthy, but he clearly has understood how to keep things in a healthy range for him. Right? Oh
yeah. Now he's obviously, responsible about what he's doing hormone wise, but like back in his heyday, would he have gotten any of those roles or become Mr. Olympia or any of that stuff without the anabolics? And ultimately that's like the idol that a lot of these guys have. Like, yeah.
Well, and football and dare I say basketball. I mean, anyone who watches the major sports leagues and thinks that there isn't hormone assistance there, some sports and some individuals, no, it's clear they're not, but it's so at this point, it's just so interwoven with the lifestyle that they live, which is training all the time and the demands that are on them. Yeah. It's absolutely clear. I mean, I know and work with a number of these people, and and they are able to do it, but that doesn't mean that the typical person, the office worker, the student, et cetera, should consider leaning into this. And I'm quite forthcoming about the fact that I went nowhere near it, right? 45 years. So, and I'm not genetically gifted to be anything, right? I just, hard work, they call it hard work for a reason. It's hard, it's painful, but it's good for you.
One thing we definitely should touch on before we close it out is so I had some general questions on, like, you've talked about before, of eating disorders, as well as, like appetite management and kind of like different strategies from a neurological side of things, and kind of like the actual neurotransmitters involved with, cravings and whatnot and addiction. One thing, you had a podcast with Mark Bell recently, and I'll put in the chat box here the link to he actually made an Instagram post about it, and it's actually the pinned comment right now on the full podcast on the YouTube video, is Greg Doucette, I guess, interpreted what you were saying as you not understanding what calories in versus calories out is.